So here's a cartoon that captures the knee-jerk response to having your autonomy taken away. So we have the wife saying, "I've been thinking about you lately," and Earl says, "I wish you wouldn't do that." "I have something for you, Earl." "Oh." "I've made a list of ways in which I think you could improve yourself. Now don't get defensive, I'm just trying to help you be happy." So Earl walks away and flushes the paper down the toilet and says to the cat, "Well, did that ever make me happy?" You know, when you start to watch how often you resist other people, I mean, just think about how many people are married here. How often have you resisted what your spouse wanted you to do? Often without really thinking about it, just because you felt as though you were losing your autonomy. This is a fundamental drive. And what the motivational interviewing folks have taught us is that it's not neutral. If you inadvertently trigger resistance by being a know-it-all smarty pants, that actually it can move people backwards in their readiness to change. So so in fact, you want to be very careful to not trigger this resistance, because you will lose the dynamic and your ability to have an influence if this knee-jerk reaction occurs. So the motivational interviewing folks teach us 3 fundamental skills that avoid this dynamic. And one of my favorite trainers of motivational interviewing, Robert Rode, has a saying, which is, "Get out of sales and get into fishing." Get your patient to tell you why they would love to do the things you're hoping they would do. And that comes by open inquiry. So how would your life be different if you were healthier, or if you were fitter, or had more energy? Listen, and my simple tip here is don't think about what you're going to say next. Just do that. Just, if you remember that one notion, if you don't think about what you're going to say next, you will listen to the last word of what your patient has to say. And that's a big gift, because most of us don't get that kind of treatment. Most people are thinking about what they're going to say next before you've finished what you have to say. And then reflect back what you've heard. And this is where immense creativity comes in, because there's so many ways you can expand on people's words and breathe more life into them and make them more fun. And so it's the notion of an open question, listen without thinking about what I'm going to say next, and reflect back what I've heard, is a very simple way to avoid resistance. So here's another little bit of data that was published last year using physicians trained in motivational interviewing techniques. And there were no differences in weight loss between patients whose physicians, this is one visit, discussed weight or not. The patients whose physicians used motivational interviewing techniques, this is collaboration, empathy, open inquiry, reflections, lost an average of 1.6 kilos 3 months later. One visit, 1.6 kilos. Those whose physicians were not using these techniques, those patients gained or maintained weight. So obviously a short-term study, but it just shows you how in a moment you can make a difference by changing that dynamic. And if you imagine that if insight is the mechanism for a change of mindset, then what has to happen is our clients have to have new insights. So there's not much help for us to have the insights. I mean, it's nice for us to have them, but if our clients don't have them, then their brains aren't changing. This is an old bit of wisdom. People are generally better persuaded by the reasons which they have themselves discovered than by those which have come into the mind of others. So when you facilitate this reaction, "Oh my goodness, I never thought about that before," then you have made a difference. So to kind of summarize, these are really kind of the 2 ways to think about the expert versus the coach. And there are places for the expert. You know, if you're going to your surgeon, you don't want to be coached about which option would be best for you. You want to know what the advice is, what's the best advice available based on the research we have. But the coach approach is better suited to the chronic piece. So when you're the expert, you think of yourself as the authority, the educator, and you know what the agenda is. You know the ranking of the behaviors that make the most impact. And that's what you place in your client's lap. Now the coach, on the other hand, positions themselves as a partner, as a facilitator, and we're there to find out what the client wants to do. What's their priorities? What agenda do they have? What happens in this dynamic is that for experts, because you are the boss, you feel responsible for your client's health, and so you can feel quite drained and burned out by the end of the day because you've been carrying around everybody's issues. The client and the coaching dynamic is quite different because we don't take on the responsibility. We keep the client in the driver's seat, and so we don't end the day feeling drained and burned out because we just haven't taken on that. We really are asking the client to do the work. The expert is focused on solving problems. The coach is focused on fostering possibilities. Very different dynamic. Expert, if you go to your physician, they look down your lab results, they follow the variance line. What's not going well? And often neglect to talk about the good numbers. Whereas in coaching, we want to cultivate the positive because people's brains work better. The negative creates the frenzy. The expert has the answers. The coach wants to help the client find the answers to the extent, especially in areas where they really are the boss of their lifestyles. The expert can sometimes interrupt. The coach is interested in the whole story. The expert approach, you can often feel like you're working harder than your patient or client, whereas in coaching, it's very much an equal dynamic. And in the expert approach, it can sometimes degenerate into feeling like a wrestling, a tug of war between two people rather than a dance. So they have very different feels and they have different outcomes. So my simple tip then is to move yourself out of the passenger seat. So for so long as you're holding onto the steering wheel, you're driving, and your patient is not learning how to drive. And if you can remember that simple visual to move into the passenger seat, imagine your clients in the driver's seat and resist the urge to grab the steering wheel. To move them in a different direction. Allow them to drive, allow them to figure it out to the extent that you can. So how does this translate then for Teresa and Dave? Through the coaching dynamic, both of them have new self-awareness and insights. Teresa's become more empathetic towards herself. She's begun to notice of how she relies too much on what other experts are saying. She's starting to appreciate that she's learned a lot on her journey, and she's noticing how her negative emotions can lead to eating empty calories. Dave has started to notice that he resists his wife pressing him to eat better, that it's really up to him to take charge of his eating choices. He's beginning to realize that the negative impact of his lifestyle is hurting his relationships. He's not present with his kids at night, and he's often overtired. So again, just sort of examples of how new awareness emerges. So let's go to one of the twin engines, elicit self-motivation. So this is, actually, have you heard the joke, how many coaches it takes to change a light bulb? None. The light bulb has to change itself. And not only that, the light bulb, as you can see here, has to plug itself in. And this is really meant to bring home the idea that motivation that works best comes from within. We have to find it from within. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that, different kinds of autonomous motivation, and then how they connect with confidence. So here's a simple example to bring out 4 different kinds of motivation. And they're in 2 camps, the external and the autonomous. And there are 2 kinds of external. So when you have an external human being telling you what to do, and you don't think much about it except I want to do what this person wants me to do, that is what we call external motivation or regulation. So in this example, I'm doing it, I'm exercising, because my wife will get upset if I don't. That's the extent of my reflection on this. Then we often internalize the external as an inner critic. We take the billboards that say eat less and exercise more, and we bring them into ourselves. And the inner critic says things like I should, I ought, I'm bad if I don't. They're self-critical statements. And that's considered a form of external motivation, and it also is unstable. It does not lead to sustainable engagement. The autonomous motivation is what does lead to sustainable motivation. And in fact, the second one here, the future orientation, when you want to be fit and strong because you want to have the energy to to make a difference every day, or you want something in the future. You don't want your children to have to take care of you if you have a stroke, or some future orientation. It's that when you connect the behavior to something in the future that you want, that is the kind of motivation that has been shown to lead to sustainable weight loss. When you have really internalized it, is it something that you are doing because you want to do it, because it's good for your future. That's the kind of motivation that works best. The other kind is also very valuable, and that's when you love to do it in the moment. You just love your yoga class. You can't wait to cook a new recipe. You can't wait to listen to music to relax. When you love to do something, you do it for its own sake. You do it because it taps into your strengths, what is fun for you. And while that's a great kind of motivation for health behaviors, often it takes a long time. For my case, it took me almost 20 years to find a meditation that worked for me. I only found one 2 months ago. And I've been a wellness professional for all these years. And so I tell you that because often it takes a long time till we find the thing that just taps into what works for us. And we want to keep looking, but we can't always find it in the time frame we need it. So we need this future orientation. It's also important to dig deeper to get what you might call to the why behind the why. I have a nice story from a coach who's a dietitian who had a client who wanted to lose weight, and her reason was that she wanted to fit into some of her clothes that she hadn't worn in a while. And they went on and on, so why do you want to do that? And then why do you want to do that? They went on to 10 whys. And the last why was, my husband died recently, and I really want to be able to wear my wedding ring again. And when they hit that why, she felt the heartfelt yearning for losing weight in a way that none of the other whys tapped into. And so to find this future orientation, it's more heart than head. You have to keep going until you hear it. As a coach, you can tell people's whole demeanor changes when they've hit on the real why being healthy matters to them. So Teresa's self-motivating vision is to be at calm and at peace, to feel in control, and also because her daughter is gaining weight, she wants to help her daughter. Dave's vision is that he's realized he wants to be a good role model, he wants to be fully present with his family, have plenty of energy, and he wants to make health a higher priority. So a coaching exercise to leave with you is 2 questions, which could be written down in your patient's reports. What do you value most in your life? What makes your life worth living? And how does being fit and healthy connect to that?